can't think of anything that he's done that really rebounds to the benefit of the American people, improves our national security, and benefits people worldwide. Hello, friends. We've reached a traditional evaluation point in any presidency, the first 100 days of Donald Trump. In evaluating his 100 days, Donald Trump is right, believe it or not, about one thing, but wrong about another. He is right about the fact, to use one of his favorite phrases, we've never seen anything like this before. We have never seen a president, even FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, in his 100 days, so shake up American society, American foreign relations, and the American economy, not by working with Congress like Franklin Roosevelt did. He got some 15 big bills passed during his first 100 days, but acting by decree, acting by executive order, and essentially claiming that he is the king. He even used those words, saying, because I'm saving the country, I can do anything I want. I'm not governed by the laws. He's even said, I run the country and I run the world. So maybe he's claiming not just to be a king, but to be an emperor. But where he's wrong about is that none of the things he's doing are for the common good of the American people or for the good of peoples worldwide. They are all designed to achieve his aims of revenge, retribution, punishment of his enemies, to exercise his power around the world, and to impose on America his own utterly distorted, politically driven views of American history and American society. Let's start with the issue that voters think is most important, the economy. Remember what Trump promised, that he'd bring grocery prices down dramatically at the very beginning of his administration, and that he would restore the economy from the disaster created by the Biden term. In his first 100 days, the contradiction of these promises could not be more stark. Grocery prices have not come down. Inflation is still somewhere between 2.5 to 3% on an annual basis, about where it had been under what Trump says was the utter disaster of the Biden administration. Aside from inflation, Donald Trump inherited a growing, booming economy from Biden, an economy that was the envy of the world. Instead of improving that economy, accelerated our growth, what's happened in the first 100 days under Donald Trump's watch? Not only has the economy slammed on the brakes, but it's actually slid into negative territory. That's right. It was small, but the economy actually lost ground in the first quarter of 2025. This should come as no surprise to anyone. Look what Trump has done with his tariffs and his whiplashes on tariffs. Soured our trade relations with our most reliable partners and created the one thing that business, the engine of the economy, hates the most, and that is uncertainty. Let's look at another big promise of Donald Trump. He was going to end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours, in one day. Well, we're actually at the 100-day mark, and we're not close to ending the war in Ukraine. Moreover, very recently, Donald Trump has perpetrated the outright lie that Zelensky and Ukraine started the war. They were invaded gratuitously, maliciously by Russia. What Trump is saying is akin to a mugger punches you in the face and you're getting the blame because you put your face too close to his fist. use a little common sense. His explanation utterly defies reality. And instead of being a fair broker to really get peace in Ukraine, what has he done? Given Vladimir Putin, the bloody dictator who is no friend of ours, who wants to destroy democracy and freedom across the world, given Putin everything he wants. Recognition of control over the province of Crimea in Ukraine, which he illegally seized by military force back in 2014. Recognize all his gains elsewhere, essentially partitioning Ukraine, something we really haven't so clearly seen since Neville Chamberlain, the notorious appeaser, was willing to let Hitler take part of partitioning Czechoslovakia. An absolute disaster for Donald Trump in trying to solve the war in Ukraine. And in so doing, along with his trade wars, along with his denigration of NATO, he has undermined the collective security between the United States and other democracies that have kept the U.S. and other Western democracies, including Australia and Canada, safe since the end of World War II. Those collective security arrangements are now in grave jeopardy for no reason under Donald Trump. As I mentioned, he is on a revenge and retribution tour, firing or demoting officials in the Justice Department or the FBI who did things he didn't like or participated just professionally in investigations of Trump himself. And let me remind you, investigations of Trump, both by the feds and state officials, have led to four actually serious indictments of 91 felony counts, a conviction on 34 felony counts. The other indictments never came to fruition because the Supreme Court, in giving Trump broad immunity, delayed the cases beyond the election, and the Georgia indictment, just a huge mess down in Georgia. But 91 felony counts indictment, 34 felony counts convicted, civilly found to have sexually abused, hurt, and defamed E. Jean Carroll, civilly found to have engaged in massive financial fraud in his real estate company. Those investigating the January 6th insurrectionists resulted in many hundreds of convictions. Trump says these are political prisoners. They went through full due process. They had a chance to challenge their indictment, to gain attorneys, to go to trial, to cross-examine witnesses, to bring witnesses, to testify themselves if they so chose, and were legitimately convicted by juries of their peers. Can't say the same for what Donald Trump is doing to alleged dangerous immigrants, plucking them off the street, masked agents without identification in unmarked cars, pulling people off the street, detaining them, deporting them without any due process. Just the say-so of Donald Trump and his loyalists that somehow these people are dangerous. There have been some investigations of this by the University of Syracuse, which has an organization that tracks immigration issues. And it found the vast majority of those detained or deported by Donald Trump either had no criminal record, they weren't convicted of anything, or at most had a criminal record for minor traffic violations that were obviously of no consequence for dangers to the U.S. or terrorism. When there's this Donald Trump basically but in practice, not following court orders. He hasn't come right out and say, I'm going to defy the court. So he's come awfully close, even in an unprecedented way, talking about impeaching judges just because they rule in ways he doesn't like. But basically, he has been following the playbook that he's been using for over 50 years: obstruct, delay, and deflect. And in that way, he's vitiated court orders, even if not openly defying them. The most obvious one is a Supreme Court order to facilitate the return of Abrego Garcia, who his own administration admitted was deported in error, that there was a court order prohibiting them from deporting him back to El Salvador. They've done nothing to facilitate his return, even though just on an interview, I think it was yesterday, Donald Trump admitted if he wanted to, he could get Abrego Garcia back, but he doesn't want to. He even either photoshopped or superimposed on Abrego Garcia's knuckles MS-13, designed to prove he really was a dangerous terrorist. But it doesn't stop here. Remember, I said another goal of Donald Trump is to impose his politically driven, distorted view of American society and history upon the country. And he's done that through executive orders, imposing his views on the Smithsonian Institution, the great keeper of our heritage, going after leading colleges and universities that teach and hire in ways that he doesn't like. We've never seen, again, to use this phrase, anything like this before, using the power of government to stifle free speech and impose a certain orthodoxy on keepers of our heritage and our critical educational institutions. And, of course, he has waged a war against science. He has erased climate change, just unilaterally by executive order, as if climate change did not exist. We're not only not going to research it or fight it anymore through the federal government, we're not even going to be able to talk about it. He has frozen or rescinded critical support for vital scientific research, including vital life-saving medical research. He's appointed as our chief health officer, the head of Health and Human Services, RFK Jr., a purveyor of quack science who clearly threatens the health and well-being of Americans. This guy had no business even being a low-level official in HHS, much less the head of health and healthcare in America. He has dismantled agencies, or at least tried to, he's being fought in the courts, established by Congress, like the Department of Education, USAID, the Consumer Financial Protection Board. And as part of this, he has empowered Elon Musk, a private citizen laden with conflicts of interest, who has never been appointed by the president, never vetted, never approved by the Senate as a federal officer. He's let him run amok through our federal workforce, firing people for no good cause and participating in the dismantling of federal agencies. And all of this is so cruel. They couldn't care less how this affects people, firing people who have disabled kids and are struggling to pay their medical bills, struggling to put food on their table, struggling to house themselves and their families. Billionaires like Musk and Trump couldn't care less. And the cruelty is even worse abroad. They have dismantled USAID programs, aid programs around the world that have saved tens of millions of lives, including George W. Bush's signature program to deal with HIV and other infectious diseases abroad. And when America pulls out, who pulls in? The Russians and the Chinese. It may take a decade or more or never for America to restore its standing around the world. Donald Trump said, when I'm president, people around the world and world leaders are going to respect me. No. They've come to hate and resent you, as we saw in the Canadian elections just a couple of days ago. The Liberal Party under Justin Trudeau was pronounced dead just a year ago. And then came Donald Trump, trying to gobble up Canada, imposing punitive tariffs on Canada, and all of a sudden things completely turned around in Canada. The Conservative Party, which was closest to Trump, plummeted. The Liberal Party soared, and it won a plurality, a substantial plurality, in the recent Canadian elections, just 3 seats short of a majority. They'll partner with minor parties, and once again, Liberals will govern solely, I would say solely, because of what Donald Trump has done. And finally, what have the American people said about the 100 days? They have given it a solid F, a solid negative rating. In the latest poll, we saw this on our live show, Donald Trump was at 33% approve, 55% disapprove. Worse than any president since World War II, even worse than Donald Trump's, who had previously held the disapproval record during his first term. And it's not just one poll. You know, you can discount one poll, but all the polls are basically converging on historically low approval for Donald Trump. And it gets worse. When you look at the issues, even his signature issue, the one he thought, would glorify his presidency, immigration, he is now underwater. On the critical issue of the economy, he's down to approval in the low 30% range. And it's not just the polls. The American people are registering their disapproval in many other ways. Consumer confidence has plunged to its lower level in 20 years. Millions of Americans have taken to the streets to protest Donald Trump. Town hall meetings by Republicans, not just in swing districts, but in red districts, Republican districts. What have they experienced? From their own constituents, anger, dismay about what Donald Trump is doing. A lot of Republicans are now going into hiding, afraid to face their own constituents. So this is my assessment of the critical 100-day mark. As I said, Trump is right in saying we've never seen anything like this before, in trying to reshape everything by decree. But he's wrong in claiming that I can't think of anything that he's done that really rebounds to the benefit of the American people, improves our national security, and benefits people worldwide. Thanks for listening.